There is a man sitting alone at 2 in the morning. He has everything he said he wanted. The apartment is quiet. The phone is on silent. He made the money he said he needed. He fixed the thing he said was broken. He said, "Once this is done, I will finally feel okay." He does not feel okay. He is sitting there in the dark, and there is this feeling, not sadness, not anger, something smaller than both, something colder, like the feeling of opening a door to a room you were afraid of your whole life and finding nothing inside, just nothing. He keeps sitting. He does not know what he is waiting for. That man is not rare. That man is most people. And that feeling, the one he cannot name, is not a problem. It is a message. And what it is trying to say is not what you think. Because here's the thing nobody tells you. You have been living inside a story about who you are, why you do, what you want, what you need. And that story feels true. It has always felt true. But stories are written, and the question is, who wrote yours? Not you. You did not write it. Your Nafs did. Let me explain what I mean. But slowly, because this cannot be rushed. Most people, when they hear the word Nafs, they think it means soul or self. And it does in some translations, but that is not precise enough, because the Nafs is not simply what you are. The Nafs is the force inside you that wants things, the part of you that pulls, that craves, that avoids, that tells you what is comfortable and what is uncomfortable, that whispers reasons, that builds justifications, that says, I deserve this and I cannot do that, and this is just who I am. That last one is the most dangerous. This is just who I am. Because when the Nafs convinces you that its preferences are your identity, the work is done. You stop questioning. You stop fighting. You think you are being authentic. You think you are being yourself. But you are not being yourself. You are being your Nafs. And those are two very different things. Here is a story. There was a student of knowledge in the early generations of Islam. He was known for his discipline, his consistency, his restraint. People respected him. He fasted often. He prayed in the night. He was someone others looked to. Then one day, without warning, he disappeared from the circles of learning. A friend went to find him. He found him sitting in his house, surrounded by things he used to criticize. He was eating without restraint. He had stopped his night prayers. He had abandoned the practices that had defined him for years. The friend asked, "What happened to you?" And the student said, "I do not know. It is like something changed inside me overnight. I woke up one day and the things I used to love felt heavy. The things I used to avoid felt harmless. I just changed." The friend sat with him in silence for a long time. Then the friend said, "The Nafs does not always fight loudly. Sometimes it waits, it watches, it learns your patterns, and when you think you have mastered it, it finds the one small door you left open, and it walks through quietly." The student looked up. The friend said, "You did not change overnight. Your Nafs changed its strategy, and you did not notice until it had already rearranged everything." That story is not just about a student from another century. That story is about the mechanism inside every human being, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The Nafs has one function, and that function is to seek comfort and avoid discomfort. That is its operating system. That is what it was built for. And in certain situations, that is useful. When the body is cold, the Nafs pushes you to warmth. When you are hungry, it pushes you toward food. These are not problems. The problem is when the Nafs applies this same logic to the interior life, when the Nafs decides that accountability is uncomfortable and therefore creates reasons to avoid it, when the Nafs decides that real change requires too much effort and therefore reframes the person's current state as acceptable, when the Nafs decides that facing a difficult truth is painful and therefore builds an elaborate story that replaces the truth with something bearable. The Nafs does not lie to you. Not exactly. It reframes, it selects, it omits, it presents the version of reality that preserves your comfort. And you think you are seeing clearly because the reframing is seamless. It happens faster than thought. By the time you are aware of a situation, the Nafs has already filtered it, already shaped the story, already decided what it means. You are reading the edited version. You have never seen the original. Now, I need you to sit with something. Think about the last time you broke a promise to yourself. Not a small one, a real one. Something you said you were going to do. A commitment you made to your own growth, your own health, your own character. Maybe it was a habit you were building. Maybe it was a behavior you were trying to stop. Maybe it was a relationship pattern you decided to change. You made the promise. You meant it. In that moment, you were sincere. And then you did not keep it. And here is what most people do in that moment. They explain it. They say, I was tired, or that day was different, or I will start again tomorrow. Or sometimes they feel guilty for a while, and then the guilt fades, and the behavior continues, and they make the same promise again later. And this cycle repeats. Months, years, decades, the same promise, the same break, the same explanation, the same guilt, the same promise. If you ask that person why, they would say, I struggle with this. I know it is a problem. I am working on it. But they are not working on it. They are managing their feelings about it, and those are not the same thing. This is what the Nafs does with your self-improvement projects. It lets you feel the intention, the motivation, the decision, and then when the moment of actual change arrives, when the behavior needs to actually be different from before, the Nafs creates friction, not opposition, just friction, just enough resistance that the easier path becomes attractive. And then it provides you with a perfectly reasonable explanation for taking the easier path. And the explanation feels true because it has elements of truth. You were tired. That day was hard. The circumstances were not ideal, but the Nafs assembles these true elements into a false conclusion. The conclusion that this was an exception. The conclusion that you are still on track. The conclusion that it is okay. And you accept the conclusion. Because you are tired, because it is easier, because the Nafs made the acceptance feel like wisdom and the persistence feel like rigidity. This is what is happening inside everyone who has ever tried to change and found themselves stuck. They are not weak. They are not broken. They are not lacking willpower. They have not learned to see the Nafs as separate from themselves. And this separation is everything. The scholars of the interior life, the ones who wrote about the Ruh and the Qalb and the Nafs with a precision that modern psychology is only beginning to approach, they understood something fundamental. They understood that the human being is not one thing. The human being is a collection of forces, and those forces have different natures, different goals, and different voices. And the problem is not that these forces exist. The problem is that most people cannot tell them apart. They hear the Nafs speaking and they think it is their own voice. They feel the nafs pulling, and they think it is their own desire. They see the nafs flinching, and they think it is their own judgment. And because they cannot separate themselves from the nafs, they cannot stand outside it. They cannot observe it. They cannot choose a different response. They can only follow. Let me describe the qalb. The qalb is not the heart as a pump. It is the heart as a center, the place inside you where your deepest orientations live, where you are turned toward or turned away from, where the compass sits. And the qalb is described in the tradition as something that moves. The Arabic root of qalb is related to turning, to flipping, to being in a state of motion. The qalb does not stay still. It is constantly being acted upon by what you see, by what you hear, by what you feed it, by what you allow near it. And this is important because it means the qalb is not simply who you are in some fixed, permanent sense. The qalb is a living, responsive thing. It is shaped by what you expose it to. It is colored by the experiences you allow to pass through it. When the qalb is clean and clear, it is like still water. It reflects accurately. You see yourself clearly. You see the world clearly. You perceive the gap between where you are and where you should be. You feel the pull toward what is true. But when the qalb becomes clouded, and it can become clouded by many things, by sin, by distraction, by persistent indulgence of the nafs, by dishonesty with the self, when it becomes clouded, the reflection distorts, and you start to see yourself as you need to see yourself, rather than as you actually are. Have you ever met someone who was clearly, obviously wrong about themselves? Not wrong in a small way, wrong in a deep way. Someone who genuinely believed something about their own character that was simply not true. Maybe they believed they were generous when they were actually performing generosity for recognition. Maybe they believed they were principled when they were actually just stubborn. Maybe they believed they were humble when they were actually only humble about the things that cost them nothing. And you could see it. From the outside, it was visible. But from inside, they could not see it at all. That is not stupidity. That is not a lack of intelligence. That is a clouded qalb. When the qalb becomes clouded enough, the self-perception machinery stops working accurately. The person still thinks they are seeing themselves clearly. They still feel like they are being honest. They still experience themselves as someone who knows who they are. But the mirror has been distorted, and everything they see in it is slightly, subtly, fundamentally wrong. Now, here is where it becomes personal, because I am not talking about someone you know. I am talking about you, not in a harsh way, not as a judgment, but in the way that a doctor talks to a patient when they have found something important and they need the patient to take it seriously. There is something in you that you have been misreading. Some pattern of behavior that you have explained in a way that protects you from having to change it. Some quality you believe you have or do not have that is not quite accurate. Some version of yourself that you carry in your head, a version that you use as your reference point, your anchor, your sense of who you are. And that version, the one you are most attached to, is the one most likely to be shaped more by the nafs than by anything real. Because the nafs does its deepest work, not in the behaviors you know are wrong. Those are visible. You know them. You feel the guilt. You fight them, even if imperfectly. The nafs does its deepest work in the identity you carry about yourself. Because if the nafs can convince you that your flaws are actually features, that your avoidances are actually wisdom, that your limitations are actually choices, then it never has to fight you. You will defend it. You will protect it. You will argue for your own limitation to people who are trying to help you. You will fight for the cage. This is not hypothetical. Think about the last time someone who cared about you tried to tell you something about yourself that was hard to hear. What happened inside you? Most people in that moment experience a very specific internal movement, a kind of tightening, a sharpening of the eyes, a sudden clarity about all the ways the other person is wrong or overreacting or not seeing the full picture. And within moments, sometimes within seconds, the person has constructed a defense, a counter-argument, a reframing of what was said that makes it about the speaker rather than about themselves. And afterward, they feel justified. They feel like they held their ground. They feel like they protected their sense of self. But what they actually did was let the Nafs protect itself. The Nafs felt threatened, not you. The Nafs, because you, the real you, the part of you that genuinely wants to grow and be better and live in a way that is aligned with something higher, that part of you would have been able to receive the feedback, would have been able to sit with it, would have been able to extract the truth from it even if the delivery was imperfect. But the Nafs does not want truth that requires change. And the Nafs is fast, much faster than reflection, much faster than wisdom. By the time reflection arrives, the Nafs has already responded and the moment has already passed. This is why the tradition speaks about mihasaba, self-accounting, the practice of sitting with yourself at the end of the day and looking at what actually happened, not the version your Nafs presents to you, the actual thing. What did I do today? What was the real motivation behind it? When I gave, was it for the sake of giving? Or was it to be seen giving? When I spoke up, was it because the thing needed to be said? Or was it because I wanted to feel heard? When I stayed quiet, was it wisdom or was it fear? These are not comfortable questions, and the Nafs does not want you to sit with them. When you try to do real self-accounting, when you try to look honestly at your own motivations, the Nafs will create tiredness or distraction, or it will tell you that you are being too hard on yourself, or it will find something outside of you to focus your attention on, someone else's behavior, something that needs to be done, something that needs to be checked, anything to prevent the inward turn, because the inward turn is the most dangerous thing the Nafs can face. And yet, the inward turn is also where the Ra lives, the Ra, the spirit, the part of you that came from somewhere else, the part that was breathed into you before you were born, the part that does not want what the Nafs wants, the part that is not interested in comfort or avoidance or the preservation of the self-image. The Ru is oriented differently. The Ru faces a different direction. And the entire interior life, the real one, the one happening below the level of conscious thought, the one that determines the actual texture of your experience, the real interior life is a movement between these forces, the Nafs pulling downward toward comfort, the Ru pulling upward toward meaning, and the Qalb in the middle being shaped by which force you give more attention to, more food, more of your choices. The Qalb moves toward whatever you feed it, and whatever you feed it most becomes the direction it faces. This is not metaphor, this is mechanics. Let me describe something you have felt without knowing what it was. You have had moments, quiet moments, where something inside you was very still, where you were not anxious about the future or replaying the past, where you felt, for a moment, something that is difficult to name, Not happiness exactly, not pleasure, something quieter, something more like alignment. Like you were exactly where you were supposed to be. Like the noise had stopped. Those moments happen in different places for different people. For some, it is in prayer. For some, it is in nature. For some, it is in acts of genuine service. For some, it is in the first moments of the morning before the mind fully starts. But almost everyone has had at least one moment like this. And in that moment, without being told, without reasoning through it, you knew something was true. You felt it directly, without the Nafs filtering it, without the layers of story and self-preservation between you and the experience. That stillness was the rewrote surfacing. And that knowing was not from thought. It was from a deeper place. The rewrote does not announce itself. It does not argue. It does not compete with the noise. It simply becomes perceptible when the noise quiets down. And most people's lives are designed, often without awareness, to ensure the noise never quiets down, because the noise is comfortable. Because the noise is familiar. Because the Nafs learned very early that noise keeps you in the horizontal. And horizontal means no accountability, no confrontation, no change. The Nafs is very good at its job. Let us talk about the feeling of emptiness after getting what you wanted. This is one of the most important experiences a human being can have. And it is almost universally misread. You worked for something. You wanted it badly. The wanting was real. The effort was real. And then you got it. Maybe it was a material thing. Maybe it was a position. Maybe it was a relationship. Maybe it was an achievement that others recognized and praised. And for a moment, there was the feeling of having arrived, but only for a moment. And then, without warning, without reason, the feeling faded, and in its place was something hollow, something almost worse than the longing, because the longing at least had direction, had energy, had the forward lean of hope. But this hollowness has none of that. And most people, when they encounter this feeling, immediately begin looking for the next thing, the next goal, the next version of the wanting, because the wanting is at least motion, and motion feels like living. But what if that hollowness is not a problem to be solved? What if it is a diagnostic? What if what it is telling you is this? The thing you were seeking was not actually what you needed. The Nafs told you it was. The Nafs constructed the whole architecture of desire around this thing, made you believe that once you had it, something deep would be satisfied. But the Nafs was wrong, not because the thing was bad, but because no horizontal thing can satisfy a vertical need. The rewrote does not need success. The rewrote does not need recognition. The rewrote does not need comfort or achievement or the approval of other people. The rewrote needs alignment. The rewrote needs proximity to its source. The rewrote needs to be turned in the right direction. And when it is not, no amount of getting what the Nafs wants will fill what the rewrote lacks. This is the hollowness. This is what it is saying. But here is the difficulty. The Nafs is not evil. I want to be precise about this. The Nafs is not something to be destroyed or eliminated. The tradition does not teach destruction of the Nafs. It teaches taming, training, raising. There is a term used in classical Islamic psychology, the Nafs al-Amara, the commanding self. The Nafs in its rawest, least developed state, the state in which the Nafs simply commands and you follow, where the desire arises and you obey it, where the discomfort appears and you flee it, where the Nafs runs you. Most people live their entire lives in this state without knowing it, because the Nafs al-Ammara does not look chaotic from the inside. It looks normal. It looks like just living your life. But you are not living your life. The Nafs is living through you. Above the Nafs al-Ammara, there is the Nafs al-Lawwama, the self that reproaches, the self that has developed enough awareness to feel the gap between what it does and what it knows it should do, the self that carries guilt, that feels the shame after the transgression, that knows something is wrong. This is actually a higher state than the first, because awareness of the problem is the prerequisite for addressing the problem. But here is the danger at this level. The Nafs al-Lawwama can become its own trap. You can become so familiar with the cycle of transgression and self-reproach that the reproach itself becomes the release valve. You feel bad enough that it counts as accountability. You beat yourself up enough that it substitutes for actual change. You make guilt into a performance for yourself. And after the performance, you feel like something was done when nothing was done. Some people have been in this second stage for 30 years. The same transgressions, the same guilt, the same temporary resolution, the same transgression. They think they are struggling. They are actually circling. And the Nafs at this stage is sophisticated enough to make circling feel like progress. Above the Nafs al-Lawwama is the Nafs al-Mutmainna, the contented soul, the soul that has been brought into alignment, where the qalb has been cleared enough to reflect accurately, where the Nafs has been trained enough that it no longer commands but cooperates, where the person's choices flow from something deeper than comfort and fear. This is not a destination you arrive at once. This is a direction you face, and the facing is the practice. Let us talk about losing interest. You have experienced this. You were doing something meaningful, something that mattered to you, a practice, a project, a relationship, a path of learning, and it was alive. And then gradually or suddenly, it was not. The interest evaporated, and you do not know why. Most people explain this as a kind of natural cycle. Things run their course. Interests change. This is just how it goes. But that explanation is too easy, because what actually happened in most cases is not that the thing lost value. The thing is often the same as it was when you loved it. What happened is that the Nafs got bored, and the Nafs told you that the thing is no longer interesting. There is a difference between you losing interest and the Nafs redirecting attention. But from inside, they feel identical. The Nafs gets bored because boredom is discomfort. And the Nafs' response to discomfort is always to move away from it, toward novelty, toward stimulation, toward the next thing that feels alive and promising and uncomplicated. Every new thing is alive and promising at the beginning, because at the beginning, there has been no friction yet, and friction is where the growth lives. But the Nafs does not want friction. The Nafs wants the feeling of momentum without the reality of resistance. So it seeks novelty constantly. It moves you toward the thing that has not yet become hard. And then, when that thing becomes hard, it moves you again, and you follow. And the deep work, the real transformation, the kind that only happens on the other side of friction, never happens, because you never stay long enough. This is not laziness. I want to be clear about that. You can be a very hard-working person and still have this pattern. You can be disciplined in 100 ways and still have this specific avoidance built into you, because it is not about effort. It is about which direction the effort goes. The Nafs will allow tremendous effort in directions that feel safe, that feel controllable, that offer a visible, measurable return, a kind of effort where you can know when you have done enough. But the real interior work has no visible return, no progress bar, no moment where you can say, I am done, I have arrived, I can rest now. And the Nafs hates that. The Nafs needs endpoints. It needs the gratification of completion. It needs to be able to declare victory. Real change cannot offer any of that. Real change is slow, invisible, without applause. And the Nafs will not participate. So it will redirect, and it will give you something more measurable to work on, something with clear outcomes, something where the effort can be seen, and it will call this progress, and you will think you are growing, while standing still in the place that actually matters. Let me say something that might be difficult to hear. The version of yourself that you are most proud of might be the version you are most attached to. Because the Nafs built it, this is very specific. I am not talking about your genuine qualities. I am not talking about your real strengths. I am talking about the version of yourself that you perform, the one you reach for when you want to feel okay about who you are, the one that serves as proof that you are a good person, a serious person, a person of value. That version, the constructed one, is often built precisely to cover the parts you're most afraid to look at. If you are very attached to being seen as generous, often the thing underneath is a terror of being seen as selfish. If you are very attached to being seen as calm, often the thing underneath is a fury you have never given yourself permission to feel. If you are very attached to being seen as someone who has it together, often the thing underneath is a chaos you do not know how to face. The Nafs does not build this false version out of malice. The Nafs builds it out of protection. But the cost of the protection is authenticity. And the cost of inauthenticity is the hollow feeling you cannot explain, because you can feel the gap between the performed self and the real one, even when you cannot name it, even when you have never put it into words, even when you have spent years pretending the gap is not there. The Qalb knows. The Qalb always knows. That is what the restlessness is. That is what the 2 a.m. feeling is. That is the message inside the silence. There is a concept that the early scholars spoke about called the ghafla, the heedlessness, the state of being absorbed in the surface of things while the depth goes unattended. And ghafla is not stupidity. Again, I want to be precise. Ghafla does not mean you are not intelligent. Ghafla is possible in very intelligent people. In fact, highly intelligent people are sometimes more susceptible to it, because their intelligence gives them better tools for constructing convincing stories, better justifications, better arguments for their own avoidances. Ghafla simply means the interior light is not being tended to. It means you are alive in the external sense, but slightly absent in the internal one. And you can function in this state. You can be successful in this state. You can be liked and respected and considered to have everything in order while being in a state of ghafla. But the Ruh knows, and the Ruh sends signals. The restlessness is a signal. The emptiness after achievement is a signal. The sudden, inexplicable sadness in the middle of a life that looks fine is a signal. The sense that something important is being missed, even when you cannot identify what it is, that is a signal. These are not problems of circumstance. You cannot fix them by changing your external situation. You cannot fix them by achieving more, acquiring more, surrounding yourself with better people, moving somewhere new. They are not signals about your external life. They are signals about the direction your kalb is facing. Let me describe another experience you will recognize. You are with someone, having a conversation, and on the surface, the conversation is about something normal, a plan, a decision, a situation. But underneath, there is something happening that has nothing to do with the words. There is a pull in you, a wanting to be understood or to be right or to be valued by this person. And that pull is shaping everything you say. Every word is being, in some way, managed. And afterward, you feel slightly tired, slightly off, like the conversation took something from you even though it was ordinary. That is because it did take something from you, not the conversation, the performance. When the Nafs is managing your interactions, every interaction is a performance. Not always a dishonest one, not always a manipulative one, just a calculated one. One where part of your energy is going into monitoring how you are being received, adjusting accordingly, protecting your image. And that monitoring never stops. It runs in the background of every interaction, every encounter, every moment when another human being is present. And it is exhausting in a way you have normalized. You have forgotten what it feels like to be simply present, to be simply in a conversation without the monitoring, to speak without calculating, to be without performing. That exhaustion, the one you feel at the end of days when nothing particularly hard happened, that is often the cost of the constant performance. The Nafs is a demanding director, and you are always on stage. The kalb, when it is clear, when it is genuinely present, has a quality of rest to it. Even in difficulty, even in discomfort, even in uncertainty, there is a quality that the tradition describes as tumanina, tranquility, quietude. The settled quality of a kalb that is not fragmented, that is not divided between competing attachments and fears and performances. And this tumanina is not the absence of difficulty. A person with a settled kalb still faces hard things, still experiences loss, still navigates uncertainty, but they face these things from a different location inside themselves. They are not running from them. They are not managing their feelings about them. They are present with them, and being present with difficulty, truly present, not distracted, not managing, not performing peace, actual presence, is one of the most powerful human states there is. Because in that presence, something real can happen. The processing that needs to happen can happen. The understanding that needs to arrive can arrive. The change that needs to occur can occur. But it can only occur in the presence, never in the avoidance. Now, I want to talk about sudden resistance. This is one of the Nafs' most effective tools. And it is one that people almost never recognize for what it is. You make a decision, a good one, an aligned one, something that genuinely serves your growth, something your deeper self has been waiting for you to do. And then, on the day you are supposed to act on it, something happens. Not a dramatic obstacle, not a crisis, just a subtle change in the internal weather. You wake up, and the motivation that was present yesterday is not present today. Or it is present, but smaller, quieter, harder to reach. There is a slight friction, a slight heaviness, nothing you can point to exactly, and you wait. You think, maybe later today, maybe tomorrow. And by the time tomorrow comes, something else has shifted. The decision that felt urgent and important 2 days ago now feels optional. Reconsidering. Maybe there are other things to consider, and you reconsider, and the decision slowly dissolves, and you feel a tiny bit of relief. That is the Nafs. That relief is not freedom. That relief is the Nafs having successfully avoided the friction it feared. And because the relief feels like relief, it feels like the right decision was made. But the right decision was the original one. The Nafs just replaced it with a different story. A story where reconsidering was wisdom instead of avoidance. A story where waiting was discernment instead of fear. This is how the Nafs operates at its most sophisticated, not with a loud refusal, not with a clear argument, with a quiet rearrangement, with a very slight shift in the quality of your feeling about something. And because the shift is slight, because it happens below the threshold of conscious notice, you think you are still thinking freely, still choosing freely. But the choice was already made by the Nafs, before you became aware of it. This is why the practice of intention matters so much, not as a ritual, as a technology. When you name your intention before you act, and I mean name it clearly, not vaguely, not to yourself in a passing thought, but deliberately and consciously, you create a before, a fixed reference point. And then, when the Nafs begins its rearrangement, when the subtle shift begins to happen, you have something to compare against. You can ask, is this new feeling aligned with my intention? Or is this the Nafs finding a reason to avoid what I said I was going to do? And sometimes the answer is that new information genuinely changes things, that the reconsideration is legitimate. But often, very often, when you compare honestly against the original intention, the shift is just friction in a different costume. And naming the intention does not prevent the Nafs from trying, but it makes the Nafs work visible. And once it is visible, the choice becomes real. I want to go back to something I said earlier. The Ruh remains quiet, but present. I said this, and I did not fully explain it yet. The Ruh is not loud. It does not argue with the Nafs the way the Nafs argues with itself, endlessly, compulsively, us with justifications piling on justifications. The Ruh is simply there, like a quality of attention that is always available but rarely accessed. And the Ruah's signal is not a feeling exactly. It is more like a knowing, a quiet, direct, sometimes inconvenient knowing. When you are about to do something that is wrong, something that you know is wrong, there is a moment, sometimes very brief, very small, sometimes lasting only a fraction of a second, where something inside you simply knows, not feels, knows. And then the Nafs arrives much louder, with much more energy, with reasons and justifications and framings, and that quiet knowing gets covered, and you proceed. And afterward, if you are honest, and if the Nafs is not working too hard that day, you sometimes acknowledge that you knew before you did it, before the justification, before the decision. You knew that was the Ruh, not a voice, not a feeling, a knowing. And every time you ignore it, every time the Nafs successfully covers it with noise, the distance between you and it grows slightly, not because the Ruh moves, because you do. The qalb turns toward whatever it is fed, and most of what people feed their qalb is designed to keep it horizontal. Horizontal means oriented toward the world, toward social approval, toward comfort, toward distraction, toward sensation. Not because these things are evil in themselves, but because a qalb that is entirely horizontal has no access to the vertical dimension. And the vertical dimension is where the Ru lives, is where the real knowing lives, is where the stability that the human being is actually searching for can be found. You cannot find vertical peace through horizontal seeking, but the Nafs will spend your entire life trying to convince you otherwise. It will say one more thing, this next thing, this achievement, this approval, this acquisition, this experience, and then you will feel settled. Then you will feel complete, and you will get the thing, and the settlement will not come. And the Nafs will point to the next thing, and you will follow until the day that something cracks. And in the crack, if you are paying attention, something else begins to come through. The crack is not a disaster. The crack is an opening, and the tradition knows this. The stories of the people who arrived at genuine depth, the ones who found real stability, real clarity, real proximity to something true, almost none of them arrived in comfort. They arrived through the crack, through the loss that could not be explained away, through the failure that could not be reframed, through the moment when the Nafs ran out of stories, and in that moment, stripped of the performance, stripped of the justifications, stripped of the comfortable version of who they thought they were, they encountered something they had not expected. They encountered themselves. And then, often for the first time, they encountered something beyond themselves. And the journey back from that encounter was the real life. The life before the crack had been a story. The life after was real. Not everyone has a dramatic crack. Some people have a slow erosion. Something that used to feel alive becomes quieter. Something that used to be enough no longer is. A kind of tiredness that sleep does not fix. A restlessness that achievement does not satisfy. And this slow erosion is its own invitation, less dramatic, more difficult in some ways because without the crack, it is easier to continue, to manage, to explain, to defer. But the invitation is the same. Look inward, not at the Nafs version of inward, not at the curated self-reflection where you review your actions and find yourself largely reasonable, actually inward, into the place the Nafs does not want to take you, into the place where the Qalb knows what it actually faces, into the place where the Ruh is quiet and waiting. Let me speak about breaking your own promises from a different angle. There is a practice in the tradition of giving the self a covenant. Not a vague intention, a covenant, a real commitment made with full awareness in the presence of something greater than the self. And the scholars spoke about the danger of breaking such covenants not primarily in terms of sin, though that dimension exists, but in terms of what happens to the interior structure of the person. When you make a promise to yourself and break it, something very specific happens. The trust between the conscious self and the deeper self erodes. And this erosion is not metaphorical. It has a texture. It shows up in the experience of trying to commit to anything. Because somewhere underneath the new commitment, there is a knowing accumulated from all the previous broken promises that this too will be abandoned. And that knowing does not make itself explicit. It does not stand up and say, you will not keep this either. It operates more quietly. It simply reduces the energy available for the commitment. It introduces a slight unreality to the intention, a performance of intention rather than actual intention, and you cannot easily distinguish between the two from the inside. You feel like you mean it, but the part of you that has learned from history does not believe you anymore, And without that belief, without that internal cohesion, the commitment has no foundation. This is why self-trust is not a soft concept. It is not a therapy buzzword. Self-trust is the structural integrity of the interior life. When it is damaged, everything built on it is unstable, and the Nafs created the damage by making the breaking of promises feel acceptable, by providing reasons each time, or by ensuring that each individual exception seemed reasonable, while the accumulation of exceptions quietly destroyed something essential. So how does this become repaired? Not quickly, not with a large dramatic gesture, not with a single powerful commitment that is supposed to make up for all the previous ones. The repair is small, consistent, unglamorous. You make a small commitment, not an ambitious one, not one designed to impress yourself or the Navs or anyone else, small. And you keep it, and then you make another, small, and you keep that one, and slowly, through the accumulation of kept commitments, the interior trust rebuilds. The Qalb begins to relearn that the voice that speaks intention is actually connected to the choices that follow. And as the trust rebuilds, the capacity for real commitment grows. Not through willpower, not through motivation, through integrity, the alignment between what you say and what you do, which is, at its root, the alignment between the self that speaks and the self that acts, which is, at its root, the reduction of the Nafs power over the gap between the two. There is something that happens when you have been working sincerely on the interior life for a period of time. Not a long time necessarily, sometimes not very long at all. The dreams become different. The quality of attention during the day changes. The things that used to pull on you lose some of their pull. Not all of it, but some. And you notice, for the first time, a kind of quietness in the moments between activities. A moment when you are moving from one thing to another, and instead of filling that moment immediately with the phone or the thought or the plan, you are simply there for a moment. And there is something in that moment, not a vision, not a voice, not anything dramatic, just a quality of being present that feels different from the usual state. That is the Qalb clearing slightly. That is the Ruh becoming slightly more perceptible. And it is quiet. And it is brief. And the Nafs will immediately try to fill the space with something. But you felt it. And now you know what you are working toward. Not toward an external destination, toward more of that. Toward a life where the silence between activities is not empty, but full. Full of something that cannot be acquired or performed or forced, only allowed. The Qalb has a natural orientation. The tradition teaches that every human being is born with the fitra, the natural disposition, the original orientation toward what is real and true and good, not built, not learned, original. And the Nafs, from early in life, begins to cover the fitra, not maliciously. The Nafs is just doing its job, seeking comfort, avoiding pain, learning from the environment what is safe and unsafe, what needs to be performed and what needs to be hidden. And by the time most people are adults, the fitra is buried under many layers of conditioned responses, learned performances, accumulated beliefs about who they are and who they need to be. But the fitra does not die. It waits. It is always there underneath the persona, underneath the roles, underneath the stories the Nafs has constructed. And sometimes, in certain moments, in certain kinds of silence, the fitra surfaces. And there is a recognition, a deep, wordless recognition of something true, and the person feels for a moment like they remember something they forgot they knew. That is not a feeling you need to chase, but it is one you need to recognize, because it is showing you where home is, and home is not a place you find. Home is a place you return to by clearing away what is covering it, slowly, with honesty, with consistency, without drama, simply by choosing one moment at a time to give the Ru what it needs rather than the Nafs what it wants. That is the work. It is the only work that matters. And it is the work that most people spend their entire lives skillfully avoiding, because the Nafs is patient, and the Nafs is convincing. And the Nafs sounds exactly like your own voice, but now you know it is not. And once you know the difference, you cannot pretend you do not. The Nafs is louder. It has more energy. It has momentum. It has decades of practice justification on its side. But the Ru is more persistent. And the Qalb, when it begins to turn, when it genuinely begins to turn, has a gravity to it that the Nafs cannot ultimately override. The question is not whether you are capable of this work. Every human being is capable of this work. The Fitra guarantees it. The Ruh within you makes it possible. The question is when you will stop giving the Nafs the final word. The question is when you will recognize the voice of avoidance masquerading as reason. The question is when you will sit in the silence long enough for the quieter voice to become audible. Not tomorrow, now, right now, in this moment of recognition. Because recognition is the beginning, and you are already here. The feeling you walked in with, the one that brought you to this moment, the one that said something is off but I cannot explain it. That feeling was not a problem. That feeling was the Ruh knocking, and you heard it. That is more than most people allow themselves to do. Stay with it. That feeling knows the way home.